Matt Weiss was Michigan's quarterbacks coach from 2021 to 2022. This past season, he also held the title of co-offensive coordinator, sharing play calling duties with OC and O-line coach Sherrone Moore. Matt Weiss was fired a few days ago for alleged computer crimes at the University of Michigan. His business, along with alleged NCAA violations that are being levied against Jim Harbaugh. Look, Michigan football has a lot of off-the-field issues to work through. And well, as a Michigan fan, as someone who attends the school, I can say two things that are true, in that Michigan on the field is continuing to get better and better and better, and they're not going away, and they're going to continue to be a near elite/elite team this coming season. But I can also say there are certainly off-the-field issues that need to be worked through. And one of them is this co-OC quarterbacks coach vacancy. Michigan has quarterback JJ McCarthy, who is a very high-ceiling kind of guy. In the past, he's also shown that he has a very low floor. And we did not see that much in 2022, except in the game that arguably mattered the most, the college football playoff semifinal, where he threw 2 pick sixes against the Texas Christian Horned Frogs defense. So to get him, and by him I mean JJ McCarthy, getting him someone who can train him, who can coach him very well, getting a good QB coach is of utmost concern. You also want someone who is a good, decent enough offensive mind where you can pair him with Sherrone Moore and the play calling stays the same, hopefully gets better, and preferably becomes great play calling, whether it was in the TCU game, whether it was in other games for the season. Michigan's play calling was sometimes woefully below average. That's for sure. So I'm just doing this video to talk about the multiple different options that you have when it comes to Michigan hiring a QB coach, a co-OC, and listen, Greg Roman is pictured up here just because he worked for John Harbaugh. He's worked with QBs that have mobility, specifically a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who honestly is more of a run-first QB, though more of an underrated passer. A lot of people don't like his passing abilities and acumen for whatever reason, but the reality is he is a good passer. He's just a much better runner. Does he have Mahomes' arm or Allen's arm, or is he as accurate as Aaron Rodgers? No, but he's still a good passer. There's a reason that he is starting in the NFL, and he's an elite runner. But I do not want that quote-unquote offense, and I put quotes around the offense, because Greg Roman's offense is just something that I do not want to see at the University of Michigan. I think that would be an absolutely bad hire. Now, in my own opinion, could it happen? Yes, because the connection between Jim Harbaugh and his brother John Harbaugh. Will it happen? That has yet to be seen, but it absolutely could happen. So I just wanted to address it in this early portion of the video, because I don't think he fits into any of the two categories that we're going to talk about today when it comes to hiring a quarterback's coach and a co-offensive coordinator. I don't think he fits into any of those categories, because he'd be not just coming from the NFL, but he really doesn't have any connections to Michigan, any connections to the college football world whatsoever. He just has a connection through John Harbaugh to Jim Harbaugh. That's the only connection he would have to Michigan football whatsoever. His offense is very unorthodox, and even though I like run-heavy offenses, JJ McCarthy does not have the wheels that Lamar Jackson does. I don't want that kind of offense here, unless we had, let's say, an Adrian Martinez or Jalen Milroe or Lamar Jackson in college. Like, someone with that kind of skill set, unless we had some of those quarterbacks, I would not want Greg Roman anywhere near my offense. Let's just put it that way. But with that out of the way, along with addressing what we're going to be talking about today, let's begin. Before we do so, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, like this video, comment your thoughts down below, and click the notification bell so you can get notified when I post new content. I have a strict posting schedule where I'm going to be posting only at 4 and 8 p.m., and it's mostly going to be on the weekdays. I'm still working out exactly how that whole deal is going to go on, but sometime later this week or this coming weekend, there will be a community post detailing a strict schedule for content release. That's just so you all know when I'm releasing content, and so that you're not second guessing yourselves when I say that I'm going to release a video. There will be a more strict commitment to releasing content at specific times, and there'll just be more continuity releasing content overall. That being said, let's get into it. You have the old connections. That's first and foremost, the first group. These are failed head coaches, failed coordinators. These are people that have potential, but they have fallen from grace. In some cases, they've fallen into the depths of hell, i.e. David Shaw. David Shaw, Tavita Pritchard, Nick Sheridan, Paul Chryst, those would fit into the categories. All of them have had coordinator experience on the offensive side of the ball. All of them have worked with quarterbacks before. Pritchard actually was Harbaugh's quarterback at Stanford for a few years and was the offensive coordinator and QB coach at Stanford under David Shaw for, I think, the past 4, maybe 5 seasons. David Shaw worked under Harbaugh as an offensive coordinator. He succeeded him and carried the mantle of success for the first half a decade at Stanford, and then it all fell apart. He began running Stanford like an Ivy League country club, refusing to fire or let go of assistants, getting stuck in his ways with out-of-date offense, and even though they still recruited well and still produced some NFL talent, their schematics were not good. They weren't well coached. They weren't disciplined, which led Stanford from being the cream of the crop in the Pac-12 and having guys like Christian McCaffrey, Kevin Hogan, Bryce Love, like great offensive players with very high ceilings, fun to watch, good O-line play, good tight ends. Like what they used to be, in my opinion, was like a more modern version of what we see in Iowa. Like QB is good to great, tight end good to great, O-line, running backs, like a more modern QB friendly Iowa is what, in my mind, I think of when I think of Stanford from the early 2000s. That Stanford's gone. Stanford is destroyed in part because of David Shaw. But that doesn't take away from the fact that David Shaw, of course, has years of head coaching experience. He coached as the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach for Jim Harbaugh for 3 years, coached running backs along with being the OC for 2010. So he was an OC at Stanford for 4 years. And then from 2011 to 2022, more than a decade, he was the head coach at Stanford and had a 96-54 record there. He went 65-40 in the Pac-12. Obviously, his first half tenure much better than his second half. It would be a hire that, from a standpoint of connections, would certainly make sense for Jim Harbaugh. Same with Pritchard. Pritchard, speaking of which, was the offensive coordinator at Stanford from 2018 to 2022. And before then, from 2014 to 17, he worked as the quarterbacks coach and wide receivers coach, coached running backs at Stanford in 2013. He's been coaching at Stanford either as a graduate assistant, a position coach, or a coordinator since 2010. And obviously that tenure ended in 2022 with a new staff and a new regime at Stanford under Troy Taylor, who was hired away from Sacramento State. So Pritchard, David Shaw, maybe both of them come to Michigan if one of them is hired. Who knows? But both of them have connections to Harbaugh, both when Harbaugh worked at Stanford, whether they were an assistant to him in Shaw or whether they were actual a player under him. And both of them obviously like that more pro-style offense. They like being physical, running the ball, which is all what Jim Harbaugh is about. Nick Sheridan, I bring up because he's coached in the Big Ten before. He's currently the tight ends coach at Washington. He was the quarterbacks coach at Indiana from 2017 to 18. The tight ends coached Indiana in 2019. He was moved back to the QB coach position and promoted to offensive coordinator from the 2020 to 2021 season before being fired after a 2-10 year in which Indiana's quarterbacks were just hampered by injuries. They had no supporting cast, and it was a really, really bad year. Not all of that's Nick Sheridan's fault, but the offense was horrible in 2021. He had to be fired to save Tom Allen's job, and certainly some of the poor offensive performance could be put on him. But he did play at Michigan. That's for sure. He's a quarterback in the Rich Rod era, played quarterback at Michigan from 2006 to 2010, and from 2010 to the present, he has worked with quarterbacks all across the nation, whether it's Saline High School in Michigan, Western Kentucky, South Florida, Tennessee, Indiana, and now he's with Washington and Kalen DeBoer as a tight ends coach. He has had his fall from grace, but he's coached QBs. He's had play calling duties, and it was actually when he was at Indiana, Nick Sheridan, that was the first time that he was calling plays. So maybe he gets another chance, and maybe this time he doesn't fall apart, and maybe he can redeem himself under Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. Last but not least, well, maybe when it comes to offensive performance, this is least, would be Paul Chryst. Paul Chryst got fired from Wisconsin after a 2-3 start in 2022. QB play was disgusting at times, at best average in the Paul Chryst era. Alex Hornibrook in 2017 or Jack Cohn in 2019 would be the hallmark of Wisconsin quarterback play in the Paul Chryst era. That's for sure. And Paul Chryst was the play caller on offense in 2021 for that 1 year in which their offense, was terrible. Graham Mertz, 1-to-1, even worse than a 1-to-1 TD-INT ratio. He threw more interceptions than he did touchdown passes. It was just bad. But being the head coach and also calling plays, we know Jim Harbaugh did this in 2018, and the offense, when it faced inferior talent, was safe, but that was the same story with Wisconsin in 2021. When it faced comparative talent or superior talent, the offense was just nothing. So maybe with less responsibility and Chryst being able to simply hone his focus on sharing play calling duties and coaching the quarterbacks, maybe he can be more successful. But I don't know. It's just some thoughts out there. And I say maybes, and maybe you guys think that I'm being too optimistic about some of these guys, but look at the third bullet point. I do not think any of these people should be hired. Maybe they should, but I think there needs to be at least an innovator being paired with one of these individuals if they do happen to be hired. Paul Chryst actually coached the Chargers when Jim Harbaugh played there, not as a head coach, but as a tight ends coach. So he was an assistant coach while Jim Harbaugh was a player. Chryst and Harbaugh have somewhat of a public friendship. They were 500 against each other. They played annually from 2016 to 2021, both getting 3 wins against the other. Harbaugh and Chryst both went 3-3 against each other. So relationships old connections. Maybe it's more accurate to call these guys the old guard. All of them have a personal connection to Jim Harbaugh or to Michigan. They all have play calling experience, but they all have had their fall from grace. And currently, all of them, except for Nick Sheridan, are currently unemployed. I think JJ McCarthy needs better than any of these guys. He needs better development, and Michigan's offense needs guys who can contribute on the play calling front, which, hey, maybe all those four can to a certain degree. Maybe a new environment, a better staff, better players, maybe a reset button going to a new program in a different conference, or in Paul Christ's case, a different division, and having less responsibility would be helpful. But I do think you would be taking somewhat of a risk there with a chance to have a lot of loss when it comes to JJ McCarthy's development in the offensive play calling. New innovators is what I'm looking for. And I only have two. I really only have two. And part of it's because, it's late January. The coaching carousel hasn't exactly ended, but it's getting later and later and later in the year. The fact is that Michigan, for the QB coach position and for the co-OC position, they could hire a plethora of different people. He could hire people that we would not even think could fit the position. And they hire that man, and they do well, and they excel. Jim Harbaugh, I think, could hire Brian Griese or Andy Kotenicki. The latter, of course, led Jalen Daniels, to throw for 18 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions, 2,014 yards, and Jalen Daniels had a 162 passer rating and an 87.9 QBR, which was third in the nation. He also rushed for 419 yards, 7 touchdowns, and averaged 5.4 yards per carry. That's at Kansas, by the way. Kansas having infinitely less talent than Michigan does, and having one of the most efficient offenses in the country. I would love to see Michigan pay big money to draw him away from Kansas. Now, he has worked with Lance Leipold at Kansas and at Buffalo for a while, so who knows if he can even be lured away or if he does want to stay there. But he has a track record of working with very successful offenses that they're not just an air raid at Kansas. They like to ground and pound too. They have an amazing running back. They have, again, 2 good quarterbacks. Jason Bean and Jalen Daniels are both good QBs. Jalen Daniels obviously better, but Jason Bean has had his own success. Devin Neal, 1,990 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry. That's Kansas's running back. So they even had a 1,000-yard rusher. Not Devin Neal, but Jalen Daniels only got sacked 7 times. He was injured for a few games, so his stats, of course, if you adjusted them for all the other games that he missed, especially since some of those games were against the Big 12's tougher competition, the statistics wouldn't be as impressive per se. But again, we're talking about Kansas. They have by far the least amount of talent in the Big 12. So bringing Kotenicki from Kansas with talent that is in the bottom tier of his conference to Michigan and Penn State are tied for second best talent in the Big Ten. Imagine what his input on offense and his position coaching would do to JJ McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, Zach Zinner, Trevor Keegan, Roman Wilson, the new schemes and new ideas. And Michigan wouldn't lose their identity. They'd still be able to ground and pound. Their passing game would be better. I think it would just overall make the offense that much more efficient and that much more dangerous. And I'm talking about Kotenicki a lot, but also you got to remember Brian Griese, who this is his first year coaching. He's coaching in the NFL with the 49ers as their QB coach. He won the national title with Michigan in 1997, so you definitely have a guy who knows how to win, who's been in a winning system, worked with a winning coach in Lloyd Carr. He has connections to Michigan. Kotenicki has Midwest coaching experience. Let's talk about both of these guys and what their connections are. Griese played in the NFL from 1998 to 2008. For this year alone, he's been a coach, a quarterback's coach for the San Francisco 49ers. He was the Rose Bowl MVP in 1998. He won a Super Bowl. He went to the Pro Bowl in 2000. He was that leading NFL QB for passer rating in 2000. So solid quarterback with a solid NFL career, solid college career as well. And he's coached Brock Purdy, who is the third string quarterback for the 49ers, to pass for 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 1,374 yards, and have a 65.5 QBR in the regular season. In the postseason, Purdy has passed for 546 yards, has had a 109.9 passer rating and a 74.6 QBR. He also has a TD on the ground. So the 49ers quarterbacks are having a lot of success, in part because of Griese's coaching. And then Kotenicki, he's been coaching as an assistant or as an offensive coordinator from 2004 to the present day. He played at Wisconsin River Falls as a center. He was an offensive analyst at Western Illinois for the first 2 years of his coaching career, from 2004 to 2005. And he's been an offensive coordinator since 2006 at Wisconsin River Falls, Mary, Wisconsin Whitewater, Buffalo, and Kansas. Very innovative person on offense. And again, Kansas was top 10 and at one point number 1 this past season in offensive efficiency, according to ESPN. These guys are the ones that I like. If Jim Harbaugh chooses one of these, especially Kotenicki, the offensive ceiling will be elevated. That's for sure. The quarterback play will improve. The running back play will improve. The offense in and of itself will just be more efficient. But then again, when it comes to the coaching carousel, there's very little that any of us know. I myself am very far from an insider. I don't have connections to schools or head coaches. I'm just someone who looks at the information, looks at different options, looks at what I know Michigan or these other schools like to run, their style of football, their identity, and I try and piece together things and give predictions in my analysis. Michigan could hire someone that we didn't even talk about to be the QB coach and the co-offensive coordinator. That would not surprise me one bit. But those, I think, are some names that we very well could see in contention for that role. Kotenicki, I just put that out there because, innovative guy, young, would be a bold move, and to just go with all the other names would kind of just be bland. Brian Griese, it's rumored that he has been contacted by Jim Harbaugh to fulfill the QB coach role. I doubt he would be hired as a co-offensive coordinator, and they'd probably just promote Sherrone Moore to be the sole offensive coordinator if Griese is hired, since he's only had 1 year of coaching experience. But who knows at this point. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.